very few people are willing to sacrifice their existing lifestyle for sustainability. They're willing to do things here and there that will help offset or whatnot. But yes, it's just a tricky situation.
I think there's no perfect solution in terms of sustainability transformation. We're in a very screwed up model of business right now. The reason being is that we're in
You're
the
watching Next Big Wave, the podcast for founders by founders in Southeast Asia. In this episode, we're going to talk about founder journeys, growth strategies, and much more. Just to help me out, if you could like and subscribe, it would be awesome. And let's get into the episode.
Awesome. So without further ado, welcome to today's episode of Next Big Wave. Today, I'm joined by a fabulous founder, Sandy Tiu, who is the founder of I Am Sustainable Studio, originally from the Philippines, but now located in Bali, if I'm not mistaken. Sandy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tim. I'm very happy to be here. Looking forward to our chat. Yeah.
Me too. And I'm very excited because of two things. One is I want to have as much female founder representation as possible on the podcast, and that's usually really tough. And also, you're in the sustainable slash impact space, which I'm trying to learn as much as possible about because it's a hot topic, in the VC world, but also in for our planet, something that needs to happen and needs to be taken action on. So, Sandy, could you give us a little background about yourself, your history, personally and work-wise, what led you into entrepreneurship?
That's a very big question, Tim. I'll start off with my own corporate journey. So I was actually an ex-corporate, like I've been in the industry for over a decade. My expertise lie in branding, business, and marketing. I've handled global bestseller brands, and the itch, or I would say the nudge, came in back in 2020. It was COVID during that time. And the long story short is I wanted to volunteer my time while I was away to volunteer for a recycling plastic. So the
Hmm.
recycling plastic nonprofit organization needed a marketing person, and I was ready to volunteer. But it turns out, number one, that they needed someone full time with no budget. And number two was also my company back then was also sponsors. So it was politically an issue, which
Mm,
then fueled it a lot for me internally for two things too, which is one, like, why is this an issue to help? Being in
hmm.
corporate is supposed to be more tools for you to help. And number two also is that what am I doing with my life? The biggest question that I encountered during this whole process was that what is the latest achievement you're most proud of? And in this whole thing, I couldn't speak of market shares or million-dollar businesses. So that was an internal journey that began sparking and everything. And as early as then, I was still in corporate, but I was doing pro bono consultancy work for non-government organizations, starting from where I came from in Philippines, and then all the way back in Shanghai, where I was based for my corporate job. Then I was supporting purpose-driven businesses and doing from what I know, which was in business and planning, strategy reviews, and marketing plans. And then one thing led to another. Life did it for me. Basically, I had to leave Shanghai for a personal emergency. My mom was passing during that time. And that was a very difficult moment. And what happened was there was so much presets, especially if you're Asian. I know your topic is a lot about Asian founders. And for us, families are very close, but also like
Hmm.
I know my baseline in China, I was supposed to work in corporate, like I had a checklist, I was functioning.
Hmm.
In Philippines, I had to take care of my family, everything. I needed a time where I don't have to be anything. And that's what drew me to Bali. Bali was supposed to be for yoga teacher training. But then I didn't realize that the island itself spoke so much about my two big passions, which is sustainability and wellness.
Mm.
These are like things that I strongly care about. And in this island, it's just like predominantly that. And in 1 month, I met people, co-founders, like people who's just doing their own change, mission led, being bold, came from like big brands and just going in here and doing it. And that just inspires you, like when you're surrounded by people like this, you just end up becoming. So that's what led me to my journey. That was like a very quick blurb, but in general, uh, I dove into this field of startups when I was here in Bali, got inspired, and coming from yoga teacher training and my sabbatical, all I wanted was to actually build a sustainable yoga wear brand. The
Mm.
initial plan was just to build a sustainable yoga wear brand, and then it
Okay.
evolved. I sourced out, and then I ended up like with a sustainable swimwear that was adopted because it was becoming a waste as well. So I said, why not do it fully better
Mm-hmm.
and adopt it to avoid the waste? And then when I launched it in Women's Economic Forum, what led to that is that they didn't care about my sustainable brand. They cared more how to do it. The businesses were approaching me saying like,
Mm.
how do you source the local communities? How do you find the fabric? How do you know which one is sustainable? But then I think let me just give the context. I have no clue about textile during that time. I'm a marketer, but also I am a strong advocate. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
what I strongly believe in. If you're a marketer, you know how to go back to the consumer mindset and what matters more. So I become very critical with everything, with sourcing things, with how to
Mm-hmm.
do things, how to do it well and right. And then after that, also being an advocate, knowing also what's greenwashing and what's not.
Mm-hmm.
And that led me to building I Am Sustainable Studio in 3 days and fully resigning from my corporate job because I was already in Women's Economic Forum and the businesses were there. And I said, if I delay this further, I will overthink it and everything else will worry and follow. So, like I just went for it. In 3 days, we had a website. I launched it, not knowing where the journey will lead. So I Am Sustainable Studio back then, the intention was to help businesses become more sustainable. And because we
Mm-hmm.
started in textile and sourcing, that was the starting point. We ended up becoming an all-in-one solution for businesses to become more sustainable, be it fashion, be it startups, be it hospitality. But
Okay.
I learned quickly and we evolved along the process like any other startup, it pivots very quick. But also
Mm-mm-mm.
you reach a very fast burnout if it's not the right direction. And I think back then my mentors were challenging me what is really the sharp focus and what is the one big idea that I was like bold enough to bet on. And at that time I started challenging myself, like, it was very close to where I came from. And I remember one friend telling me if there's something misaligned within you, it will always come up. And I was
Mm.
feeling so burnout and I was like, there's so much we're doing in small projects, but the impact wasn't there. The sales wasn't there. So there must be something I was doing wrong. And what I did was reassess the problem and I saw, okay, the real problem I'm trying to solve is that there's textile waste that goes
Mm-hmm.
into the landfills. There's 92 million tons annually that goes into
Mm.
the landfills. That doesn't mean yet what is in our landfills today. How many families, communities are living in the landfills, right?
Mm-hmm.
But why is it that every time we talk about textile waste, we just associate it to fashion? This remains unclear for me. Yeah, okay, they are the main player, but are there other players who are notorious about this?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so during this whole process, I was struggling a lot because it was also like a startup and I wanted to quit, just like anyone, any founder. I wanted to quit at the very start. But then I was
Mm-mm-mm.
chatting with one of my close friends also in hospitality. And because I was also a consultant in hospitality, that inspired me. Suddenly, where I came from, I can see like it was floating. I remember the vision was like it was like the sofas, the couches, the beddings, the linens. I saw textile in hospitality, and I was like, wait, who's doing something about it? And what's happening to it? So I dove deeper, went in. Nobody is in this industry focusing on it. The data that is accessible in the market today is just all the way from Denmark to understand
Mm.
the circularity, the process, and what I've come to see is that there's a constant waste feed that's coming into this very big industry of hospitality that needs to
Mm.
become more sustainable, that's growing on a kicker of a double digit for the next 5 to 7 years, has a big demand to become sustainable because now there's more certifications, there's the processes as well for green earth and everything in terms of um, offering the guest experience of sustainability, but they don't know how to do it.
Mm.
And it has become an accepted process of hospitality to consider that this is an asset, but this will go straight to waste because we
Mm-hmm.
need to make sure everything is pristine and perfect. I came from a lot of business trips back in my previous career, and I think I, me being a consumer, I'm also part of the problem. But
Right.
us being a consumer, when you have no options, no other options, you don't feel like your hands are clean, but you
Mm-hmm.
don't give them options. And I think this is the challenge today of our reality. Is like everything is linear because the system is linear. You have a team in corporate, you have a team called purchasing. What
Mm-hmm.
do? They just purchase. But do you have a team called waste upcyclers? Nobody has. They just
Mm-mm-mm.
have a team called Sustainability Champions, but what do? Right? Who's responsible to actually create from waste again? And I think this is where my vision comes in more clear, is because I learned in this whole process that my passion really lies in terms of circularity, introducing the circular economy principles to a world that's still linear. And I really strongly believe that this is the future of sustainability. Business models today are not meant to succeed efficiently in circularity yet, because we
Mm-hmm.
don't have the ecosystem yet. But this is the same as like solar panels like a decade ago. Solar
Sure.
panels back then was not a viable solution because of the price points, because the demand was very low. But if you increase the demand, the supply will also make sense so that it lowers the pricing and adaptability becomes easier. So in the future, what I am seeing or envisioning is that that's the way of how responsible business should be. That each businesses can responsibly take, make, and create from their own waste. This is where we are very passionate about in I'm Sustainable Studio, helping hospitality industry to create again from their textile waste resources.
Okay. And like if you were talking in tangible terms, because I understand the whole concept, I understand the direction it's going, and I understand how important it is, but like on a day-to-day when you're working with brands who want to go in the route of sustainability, what exact services or product do you offer them to help them get into that direction optimally?
That's super on point question. So, in terms of services, the first one is that we collect their waste. We help them start with an audit in terms of like what kind of waste, their current practices, and their own assessment of how sustainable they are. And
Hmm.
then from the submission of their textile linens, so they do their own textile auditing in their own ecosystem. They audit their own textile waste process and also their current existing waste. And then we check if it's viable for us to actually work on. So we work with 100% pure cotton,
Hmm.
bed linens that's purely white. It's a homogeneous waste that we're focusing for recircle. Recircle is meant to actually recreate from textile waste to turn it into fiber, fiber to yarns, and create it back into fabric that can be
Hmm.
used into multiple items into the hotels again. So for
Okay.
Recircle, it's the collection process of waste. Once it is, so they submit to us the form, and then we check the material itself. Once it passes through our checking process, what happens is that we collect it, and then it gets sent to our vetted processors. The
Okay.
vetted processors then shreds it, turns it from fiber to new yarns again, and then the new yarns get spun into fabric. The
Hmm.
whole point is that we're trying to reduce the consumption of new resources and try to
Right.
create again from our waste. And then from this, you have a fabric that is versatile enough to be used either as interior solutions, even for staffing, like uniforms, can be also for their internal purposes or even guest products. So
Hmm.
it's like reinventing the whole consumer experience from their end. Where we are today, we've offered already and we've garnered over a ton of waste with our 14 hotel partners.
Okay.
And right now, we're also in the product development. So we've also catered to some hotel partners already in terms of custom products like, say, book covers, menu covers, table napkins, cushion covers, all these recreated from either purely 100% cotton and woven, and
Hmm.
also like designed with weaving communities in the process. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And so I was, I've been interested in sustainability and impact more and more recently. So I've been on like a YouTube rabbit hole of different companies doing different things. And actually, I saw one that was also in the hospitality business, and they were recovering all these soap bars and repurposing them into new
Mm.
soap bars. Have you looked into that at all?
If you're watching this and you're a B2B startup founder in Southeast Asia, struggling to grow your startup, we have a whole community of founders just like you. And on a weekly basis, we discuss strategies and growth hacks. We'd love to have you amongst us. Feel free to join at nextbigwave.co or find the link in the description. I'll see you there.
Yes, I know some of them actually in all the local players in the market because it's very localized initiative. Yes,
Hmm.
so they do have it also here in Bali, and it's a
Okay.
nonprofit organization. And what they do is empower a community in the process. It's for the indigenous ones that are living. Sorry, it's not even indigenous. Correct me. Correcting myself. It's from the landfills. They live in the
Okay.
landfills, And what they do is they collect on a subscription model. Super interesting. So they have a maximum of, I think, 10 or 15 kilos. And then if they do so much more, they have to pay per kilo. But the
Hmm.
subscription allows them to pick up every month. And then what they do is they cleanse it, they shred it, and
Hmm.
then they reform it again.
So
So,
for
you
soap
know, in this,
specifically. Yeah.
correct. And then
Mm.
they include, I think they mix it with another ingredient, but basically they just reform it again and
Yep.
distribute it back to communities. But the very interesting part about this is hospitality clients pay for it because for
Mm.
them it allows with a waste disposal, but also there's the CSR factor of helping the communities.
Right.
However, scalability wise, it's very manual, and that's the
Right.
challenge today. In where I am, I do recognize a lot of efforts of communities and non-government organizations, which I'm aiming to collaborate in the future. I don't
Hmm.
mean to take them away from livelihood. I think the challenge today is that I'm seeing the scalability issues of what they're dealing with. What happens
Right.
today is that clients or hospitality just say they're charity or donating, but in reality, when you go visit them, they get dumped with so much waste and linens, and
Hmm.
they're all asking me like, can you help us, can you get more designs, can you help us figure more things out? And also if there's tears and stains for the
Yep.
fabric, it becomes more effort for them to work on it. It means they have to dye it, they have to cut it, there's more manual labor time also in this process.
Right.
My aim is that we can create a scalable solution together with the machines that we're working on today and pilot
Hmm.
process. Yeah.
Yeah, I think sustainability and scalability are two very difficult words to work together right now, right? Because you're mentioning kind of recovering these 100% pure cotton and then tearing it apart, then repurposing it. And when I look into studies, I often find that as of today, at least, it's still cheaper to get raw materials and to create from scratch than to repurpose and reuse. So, how do you handle that? And do you see that changing over time?
1000%, Tim. I think any impact entrepreneur will tell you like we're in a very screwed up model of business right now. The reason being is that we're in the business of the future and not the current. The model of today does not make sense at all,
Mhm.
especially for businesses that's designed for profit alone. However, what's changing is sustainable finance, green financing, and also looking at finance beyond just the numbers, which means that what comes we see also in the policies of Europe today is that there's demands now to report the scope emissions. Your how are you managing your waste, your impact reports. This is becoming a new metric of your more than just profit. Purpose now becomes a mandatory to businesses. And I
Mhm.
think the challenge today is that it does not make sense to invest upfront right now, but in the future it will future proof your business if you invest today. Um, and I do see this as a challenge in terms of just an initial giving birth pain points, mainly because, like, an example for us, we're talking, say, future machines, future scalability, and in Asia, we don't have it. That's the
Mhm.
sad part. The ecosystem of Asia, specifically in textile waste, is designed for pre-consumer. So how messed up is that? Because the real problem that's going to the landfills is post-consumer. But who's doing anything about it? The people who knows more about these, I do know, are in Europe, are in US, but we don't have that expertise here yet. Expertise in people, expertise in technology. These are the gaps
Mhm.
I'm seeing in the market today, but also like again, I'm not focused on just textile per se. We're looking at hospitality industry that's forever changing now. And nowadays, what's super interesting in what you're saying is that the hospitality industry, there's an aspect where they care about the COGS, the cost of goods sold, but
Mhm.
they also highly care about the guest experience and also like, showing the corporate sustainability. So with these in mind, I think it's a very tactical direction also in terms of the leaders of tomorrow. How
Mhm.
is conscious leadership being practiced to how you're going to balance it out? Because yeah, you can keep on purchasing things and buying it
Mhm.
off. But at the end of the day, when you come to your waste and you audit it and show your impact report, you're gonna fail.
Right.
And at that point, it won't matter anymore what profits you've delivered if at the bottom line of it, your scope three emissions are much worse. And I think this is the conversation that I'm slowly having with initial general managers and CEOs today, which I'm very happy that this conversation is going, but not everyone is open to it. I deal
Hmm.
with clients who just tell me like, yeah, but what's the bottom price? And for me, it's like, this is your emissions if you do this one, and this is the price you have to pay right now. But
Hmm.
your future currency will be much better. So I
Right.
think it's also a lot of mindset discussions that we have to cultivate. And what brings me hope is that the children of tomorrow and your future customers
Hmm.
are more educated than the leaders of today.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh, this means that the old school way of doing business and teaching will not be there to last because they would eventually have children and CEOs who will be coming in and changing and challenging everything. And this is the conversations that we need to definitely have and push forward for.
I agree with that. And actually, it makes me think of something where you mentioned mindsets, whereas in Europe, where it's a lot more ahead, I think a lot of the change is led by regulation. So, you know that Southeast Asia hasn't started too hardcore on implementing regulation in terms of sustainability. So, do you think in a region like Southeast Asia, mindsets matter more for change and sort of the requirement for sustainability on the demand side is more important than regulation? How much of that demand for sustainability from the consumers are you seeing, and do you kind of agree that that's what's leading the change in Southeast Asia?
I think it's a two-pronged way for sure. Change cannot happen one way. Like the regulation, especially in Asia, is very much driven by politics, politicians, leaders. And leaders will only look into it if there's a push from external. I'm Filipino. It's the same conversation. My company is originally based here in Indonesia. Um, and that brings in a lot of very tricky conversations in terms of even if you have the regulations, how do you actually implement it? So there's one thing in the creation of regulations. There is definitely a lot of mindset push. However, the other thing is cultivating that regulation so that the implementation process for the mid-tier level and also the other market leaders are there. If they cannot understand nor see the value of what we're doing, there's no point. Okay, let's take in case as example, the fact that in terms of regulations, segregation is still not mandatory for
Hmm.
most in Southeast Asia. Uh, Look into China. I lived in China before, and what the government did is actually implement um, what's this penalties. Implement penalties for households for the ones who don't segregate. Suddenly, one day we're just forced to segregate, and it became a trend on Taobao, wherein we had to buy like the trash can that had like 3 to 5 different
Hmm.
kinds. But it forced us, and implementation is only as good as putting in the regulations, but mindset shift also has to be there, otherwise they're useless. Mindset shift comes together with a behavioral change. Behavioral change will only be impacted depending on how strict the implementation of regulations are and how much you keep on cultivating the mindset. So if you
Hmm.
ask me in terms of which matters more, I think it's a two prong. It cannot be either or, it has to be both. But what I can definitely tell you is that there's a lot of responsibility now, more than ever, for leaders today. Because yeah, like I'm very happy of European standards that's actually working in progress. Even the transparency for green marketing has been there. Being able to substantiate every claim is very strong. But I actually worry more for Asia because I don't know how we're going to shift towards these without like this all personal incentives of our leaders in terms of implementation. That's very frustrating for us. Like I am in the field of this making from waste, and
Hmm.
I see them doing like sustainability forums, creating like this whole policies, and you can see there's plastic bottles being distributed to the leaders. They
Hmm.
showcase like plastic noodles in their forums. So what now happens to real sustainability? It's becoming more a trend and a jargon in the economy more than just implementing and practicing it. I think there's a lot of gap for educating our leaders. For us, that's also a big challenge that I'm encountering, and we're also delving deeper into this.
Yeah, and speaking of sort of educating our leaders, a lot of people who, strive for a sustainable future and are willing to make efforts, and I'm talking about individuals, they get slapped in the face with things like leaders going to the World Economic Forum in private jets with, big gas guzzling cars, kind of trying to give regulations for people to stop using straws and things like that. And there's a massive contradiction between their actions and the actions they're asking of their constituents. So how do you think that can be addressed for people to take these initiatives more seriously rather than feel like they're just being used as pawn while leaders can do whatever they want about their sort of non-sustainable lifestyles?
I think there's no perfect solution in terms of sustainability transformation. It's definitely a roadmap more than just a one stop shop, like a change that adapts to everyone. Definitely, even we still need plastic somehow. We still need to like fly here and there, right? But I think what's acceptable for me is that they bring in some consciousness towards what they're doing and at what cost. So take in consideration an example like computing your own footprints, also offsetting it when you're having to do these things is one. Um, and the other thing also is looking inward into a way that we're looking for the future more than the now. The now
Hmm.
today we've accepted that okay, we have a huge problem with our emissions. We have also the SDG goals binding across the world to have a shared vision together. But what does it mean for you? Do you want your grandchildren or the children of your children to actually be facing a world where there's no more nature, that it's all plastics more than fishes in the ocean? Do we want to lose the essence of nature for us? But we don't see this because we're not close to it, especially if
Hmm.
you live in the cities. And I think this has become my job, because I'm currently in Bali, but I'm going to Manila soon, and I'm also going to Jakarta soon. And
Hmm.
I see this as a huge gap because I living next to nature, it's so different versus living in cities, wherein
Hmm.
even just a click, you can have everything, but you don't know the cost of what it takes. Um, I think for the leaders who's living into these lifestyle, to be able to be aware of it will change how you act on it. And
Hmm.
the change has to begin with their own selves. How
Hmm.
can they slowly adapt to the change? Nowadays, we have so much EVs that's becoming very sexy, and cool. Tesla ages ago used to be just on that crazy vision. Now they're becoming a standard in the EV industry. And I think as leaders, you can still have that sexy lifestyle, but even made more challenging if you can make it sustainable. And I think the respect you can gain for the future is so much more as compared to like the gaps that you have to sacrifice for the living conscious lifestyle today. I
Hmm.
think in terms of adaptation of all these like habits that they can cultivate, it really starts from what is driving your own footprint.
Hmm.
So traveling is definitely one, but then if we do have to, there's offsetting. There's also like energy is a lot also. Energy and transportation are the next big ones that we can also adjust. But that
Hmm.
said, it doesn't mean that we're just gonna let off with everything else. I think it's a matter of like it's a give and take, right? You can never
Hmm.
really be fully perfect. Like even I as an advocate, we have our own faults too, and we're all just learning in the process because this world of sustainability that we're all getting at, nobody knows. Nobody
Right.
really is an expert at it. I mean, I just came from Terra Do. They're doing an amazing job in terms of doing sustainability courses. And what we're saying is that we are learning everyone in the process. Even the
Hmm.
sustainability champions of the biggest corporates, they're still figuring it out.
Right.
And I think that humbles everyone. Be you as a leader or be you as an entrepreneur, we all have a responsibility and it's shared. And if we want a better world for tomorrow, or at least to keep our current nature, then we
Hmm.
have to do something today.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. I think it's just such a tricky one because very few people are willing to sacrifice their existing lifestyle for sustainability. They're willing to do things here and there that will help offset or whatnot. But yes, it's just a tricky situation. But I'm happy there are people working hard at it, and I think more and more. So awesome, and congrats to you. Now, I kind of want to know, you mentioned very early on in this conversation how at the very beginning of your adventure, you were kind of thinking about quitting. That is something that a lot of founders go through. I completely adhere with that. Tell me about the ups and downs of being a founder. This is something relatively new to you, so I'm kind of interested in like your fresh take on being a founder.
Oh wow, being a founder is the hardest thing I ever did in my whole life so far, I would say. Um, I think the biggest difference, Tim, is that you incorporate, you don't know how much you're so spoiled uh,
Yeah.
in terms of ecosystem, in terms of budget, in terms of having everything done in one click,
Hmm.
as compared to you being a founder. They don't tell you that being a founder is basically an umbrella term for everything else.
Right.
I call myself, as before I was called like a chief everything officer, because everything else in the gaps in between you do. Sometimes you're
Hmm.
hustling in front of the client. Sometimes also you're picking up the pieces. You're doing also financials and everything. But I
Hmm.
think what I definitely learned is to bring back my corporate discipline. And that said, corporate life does not negate my corporate life experience to be where I am today. I
Hmm.
take in everything that I learned and also bring it in as a founder. But definitely one of the hardest starts for me was that as a founder, number one, they don't tell you how personal the journey is.
Mm.
If you don't listen to really what truly sparks you or brings you joy, you will get a burnout very, very fast. That is the truth that I've noticed for myself throughout this whole journey, because the biggest truth is that you will be working closely with yourself more than ever. And
Right.
kudos to the ones who have co-founders. I am a solo founder. I've been struggling to find a co-founder, but then for me, even if you have a co-founder, it gets really personal because you have to
Right.
know what you really want. What are you in it for? What do you want as a vision, and what change are you there to put? That probably is the biggest barrier in terms of knowing deeper of yourself first before going
Hmm.
out and be the change for the rest of the world. Um, the biggest challenge too for me, number two, was finding the right collaborators in the ecosystem
Hmm.
today, being a nobody. When I say I'm
Hmm.
being a nobody, I was not born with a silver spoon. Everything
Hmm.
I have right now in my corporate life, in my experience, I worked hard for.
Right.
I take everything for me, invested in myself. Everything was also bootstrapped by me. I
Hmm.
did eventually have angel investors who believed in what I'm doing.
Okay.
And these are females too. And I strongly believe in pushing further for that because I've gone through so many no's in this whole experience.
Hmm.
No's meaning like I was almost cheated on by a previous manufacturer. I
Hmm.
also struggled a lot in getting the right ecosystem to believe. I remember going into Taiwan Expo. So it's a textile expo. It was a very big one. And my intention back then was to find other partners. And I
Hmm.
remember 98 out of 100%, they would tell me that's too hard. Like, why are you doing that? That's too hard, too much. Like, what's
Hmm.
the point? And I'm like, they just find it's too hard, but they know it's possible. They didn't tell me it's impossible. They just
Hmm.
told me it's too hard, so why bother? And then I'm like, but of course, like I'm talking about post-consumer waste, which is the problem.
Yeah.
The problem, but what I encountered deeper was the problem was that these mindsets that drag you down, the belief system
Mm.
that just
I
kills
agree.
the spirit. Yeah, and when you're told that that's too hard, like why bother? That's even worse than me just pushing all the barriers, because that's basically me losing hope in you that you can't even accept or embrace change from the
Hmm.
very start. And that's really something that I struggled with at the start when I got like when one manufacturer relationship did not go well. I basically dove into all the options because at the start it was very heartbreaking. Like I built that relationship for a long time and then it did not work out. But apparently it's
Mm.
part of the entrepreneurial journey, and I'm a
It
first-hand
is.
entrepreneur. It was very, very painful. I remember I was joking, this is worse than a heartbreak,
Oh,
because you
yeah.
put
It's
so
tough.
much
It's
at
tough
stake.
because you're so personal into it, right?
I didn't know how personal it was. So, as I
Yeah.
said in point one, it's very personal, but then I learned deeper in terms of what I can do after. So, I showed up, I was doing semi fundraising, I was pitching, not knowing where it's going to lead. But, Tim, I
Hmm.
did all these without a proof of concept. Why? Because it requires technology, because it
Hmm.
requires expertise. But I showed up and I constantly showed up and tried all the options. I went all the way to reaching out to people in Turkey for expertise, but then they were charging an arm and a leg for me, so I couldn't. And then I remembered reaching out to other manufacturers as well to create all these options. Right now, where we are at is we've done two pilots in Vietnam, and still finishing two more in two different countries. One is Indonesia and another is in India. But
Okay.
a year ago, we had zero. We had zero
Hmm.
because basically the partner manufacturer, wherein I had a client already, basically left me off in the middle on the air.
Mm.
This is what happened. But then I think when we can turn the no's into a no for now, but a yes later on, I think that's when you learn the grit and the resilience and you strive for yourself because you learn also not to depend on anyone.
Hmm.
So now every time there's a problem, I'm like, okay, what's the options that lays down for
Hmm.
you? And it's the same in corporate, right? What's the rational options? What's the risk? And how can you handle it? This has been the process that shaped me, especially throughout, especially since like I remember also pitching endlessly at the start, my crazy idea, and then pitching that made it to also on national TV. And it was
Mm.
funny because if I look back at it now, I'd be super embarrassed about it. Mainly because I know so much better. Like,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
that
yeah.
was silly. It's like, what was I thinking? I was thinking to get investors when I didn't even have an MVP. And I didn't
Mm.
even know the financial modeling during that time. And
Hmm.
it's still changing as we go, right? Because as I talk more to customers, as we develop the product, it changes constantly. But
Right.
at least to know the factors also of, which brings me to my third point, the living with uncertainty as a founder is probably
Hmm.
the biggest downer also in the struggle because you're working with the unknowns and you can
Hmm.
only know how good you can manage to be an entrepreneur as much as you can handle the unknowns. If you met me a decade ago, I'm such a planner in my life. I really knew where I'm gonna go, when, and what. But when you become an entrepreneur, you basically know what you don't know and know what you wish to know. And I think
Mm.
that's important because if you know what you don't know, uh, then you can also ask for the right support from the people who
Correct.
will mentor you. And what you wish to know are the ones also that you can dive deeper. Either you learn deeper or you rely on others to grow vertically with you also. So that's how I've grown so far. And for me, what I've seen is that we've grown with collaborators. I've grown with
Hmm.
experts and collaborators. I've grown also personally to learn that I also still have a voice. I think me being Asian, I did not know I had a voice. Before coming
Mm.
into this podcast, I was getting like almost a nervous breakdown because I'm like, why me?
Oh,
I'm a
really?
nobody. I'm just
Well,
trying
I
here.
hope you feel better now on the podcast.
Well, I'm very open about it. I think you need to accept that these moments are always gonna
Hmm.
come. And I think as any founder, there will always be that questioning head. Like,
Hmm.
why me? Or like, am I a hoax? Because like
Right.
we're just trying here.
Imposter
Everyone's
syndrome,
just
right? Mm.
exactly. The imposter syndrome will always get to you. But then
Hmm.
as a founder, your biggest ally is yourself.
Right.
And the vision that you have. So you're only as good as you working on your vision, be it like how fast, how everything will work is beyond your control. You can push, but the strongest that I've worked with is the pulls
Hmm.
that come in, the support that comes in, the network, the mentors that draws in, that's constantly showing up for me. Um, so yeah, like the collaboration is really the key, and the communities behind that supports us is also something that keeps you growing.
Yeah. I want to touch base on, you mentioned having a strong co-founder is something that you struggle to achieve. Are you still looking for a co-founder? And if so, maybe we can help you with this podcast. Like, what are you looking for?
Definitely, still on the lookout. Oh my gosh, it's like another dating life, I would say.
Yeah.
um, I've put myself out there for a while, but then what I focused on for a time was to figure out what the heck we're building. And in
Mm.
building what we're building, now we know that we're in the textile recycling industry for hospitality. And we're also in the product development process for I Am Sustainable to become the new brand, the new sustainable brand that becomes the new standard of hospitality. So
Hmm.
creating this too, I'm on a lookout for engineers for sure,
Okay.
because it's very technical. Textile engineers and sustainability engineers are very much needed more than ever. Uh, Innovations today rely a lot on these. That's something that we're still struggling with, and also somebody in sales and finance. Um, because I'm the visionary, I'm the crazy one who
Hmm.
already had all these vision, and I've been doing all these multiple hats. Right now, the multiplication process has been struggling. um, in the finance, I've learned also fundraising is a whole new world. I can't explain any deeper, but then like in the finance and sales part, business development side, that's something that you have to be having a sharp experience on would make it a lot easier and faster for us in terms of these discussions because we're
Hmm.
almost there. We already have the prototype.
Hmm.
Have our first one finally done and achieved in India, and it's coming soon. So that I'm very excited about. But then also like now that my future clients are reaching out, the challenge of how to make it a viable model together with a very sustainable financials, as we said, right? Scalability is still important for
Hmm.
us.
But
Yeah.
ideally, someone in Bali, though?
No, life
No?
can be remote. There's so much
Okay.
that you can do from remote. So actually, one of my licensed collaborators who helped us pilot the first one, the first
Hmm.
successful prototype, is all the way in India. And
Okay.
she's a female. I love it. I'm very happy, like I'm not delineating male, but
Okay.
in
I
general,
mean,
like
it's up to
there's
you.
so much power into it. Yeah.
So, if anyone's listening, basically, and you're either a technical or a finance person interested in this type of sustainable business, I'm going to include Sandy's link to her LinkedIn below, and feel free to reach out to her. But speaking of LinkedIn, as kind of like a closing discussion, I saw that your latest post went super viral, where you talk about how big brands are buying their way into sustainability conversations, where the small players who are the most active and the most passionate are struggling to make a name for themselves. Do you want to elaborate on this post? It's like I was just going through it before our call. First of all, congrats on the virality.
Thank you. I'm a bit scared. Actually, I haven't looked into it again. But it's getting really crazy. I did not expect it at all because it took me 2 weeks to post that. As I told
Hmm.
you, I always doubt myself, but also when I held into that, so basically this whole Indonesia International Sustainability Forum, I flew back just to make it in time. I was
Hmm.
very passionate about it. I went there to the conference with barely any sleep coming from Hong Kong textile exhibition. And then when I made it there, what surprised me is that in the exhibition, the first thing you will see is Pertamina. Pertamina is the oil and gas company that's dominated here in Indonesia. Of course, the
Hmm.
biggest booth is right
Hmm.
there in front of you. And then you walk further and you will see this noodles brand called Indomie.
Hmm.
And I remember taking a video of their booth and laughing to myself. And they were like basically not even approaching me because their booth is empty. There's nothing to share or to say except these plastic noodles in a plastic packaging, basically, that they
Hmm.
wrap together, showing Indonesia in Sustainability Forum and then their proposition, and all that. And I couldn't help but question, like, what happened? You are calling in international guests in a sustainability forum, and this is what you should. What this is what Indonesia wants to showcase,
Hmm.
doesn't it? And here I am trying to lessen all the waste as much as we
Hmm.
could, and here you go supporting in the big ones, whom obviously are sponsors, who
Right.
can just pay off their way.
Hmm.
And what happens now to the change that we small players have no resources, trying
Hmm.
all the best we could, like getting in our voices for what? At the end of the day, the government will get the money, accept it, allow them to showcase it.
Hmm.
But I remember one of my biggest mentors in sustainability, his name is Nitin. Nitin, if you're listening, you're amazing. Um,
Hmm.
Nitin told me that if we want big change, we need to embrace corporate. We just need to know also how to guide them properly towards the right action. So,
Hmm.
yeah, okay, maybe you do have initiatives. Maybe this was not the best. There is a way to reframe it. We can have that conversation, but then sustainability does not need to be just a show off of your product with a bundle of it. There is
Hmm.
more than that. There is more than just sustainability being a one off campaign. This is the same as saying marketing is just Instagram, guys. There's so much science behind it and frameworks and roadmaps to change. You can't just expect change that when you deposit today, this will be the impact tomorrow. And I think this is what the corporations are called to do. If we small, medium businesses and startups need support, more than ever, it's from corporates because they have the power, they have the means, they have the money. They just don't know how to support it. And this is where the gap has to be filled in. This is where we're entirely supporting others. This is why I studied corporate sustainability because we're not saying you're not allowed. We're not saying you're not supposed to be there. What we're
Hmm.
saying is do it better. the change has to begin with everyone. And they have a higher responsibility given the scale of their brand. And responsibility now is becoming the new future of marketing for consumers. Yeah.
I love it. Well, those are words to live by, and I think, and if any big corporates listen, you need to pay more attention. You need to do the right thing. Speak to Sandy if you need some advice. Sandy, it was a pleasure having you on the show. I'm super glad we got to talk, and I'll be in Bali very soon, so maybe I'll get to meet you in person.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Perfect. When are you coming? Message me.
early November. I'll definitely message you.
Perfect. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
All
Looking
right.
forward. Thank you, Tin.
Thank you
Appreciate
so
this.
much.